Hello, everybody. This is Tim, and I want to talk about one-shots and games that you're going to prepare to run at a convention. Now, for some of you, you've probably never been to a convention before, and others might have gone. Maybe you go every year, maybe you go multiple times a year. I know there's conventions over in the UK and places all over the place in the United States. Um, I've never really been to Gen Con or Origins, and my exposure to conventions are pretty small affairs put on by gaming clubs. It's pretty much all the ones I've ever been to. So, take that with a grain of salt when I say this, because I've only ever really been to a small convention before. Uh, there's a few gaming clubs. There's one up in Butler, PA, Circle of Swords that I go to, and, my gas club that I go to in Pittsburgh. And they both put on conventions. And I've kind of been getting more involved with the convention scene where I'm at. So maybe you should check online, see if there's any gaming conventions in your area. And maybe there's one that's like 3-4 hours away that you can go to, and maybe you can kind of make that work with your schedule if it's only once a year. Set up go to a hotel, or usually there are rooms at the conventions themselves. A lot of these conventions are near hotels or at the top level of a hotel. But really, what I want to talk about is the prep work. What do you do ahead of time? How do you try to make the adventure more unique? Something that is more worthwhile, I think. When I run games at a convention, I always try to do something unique. I try to step up the prep work a little bit. I don't want it to seem like it's just another game. Like if you were having a home game, it's just, okay, it's next Monday, let's play. I usually have more handouts. I put more work into the storyline, more work into the NPCs. Sometimes I have like a gimmick or a gift. Sometimes I'll buy a book of whatever game I'm running, and I'll either do it randomly or I'll give that book at the end of the session to the person I think really kind of stepped forward or was like the VIP or I guess not VIP, but just the most interesting person that role played the table or played their character well. Sometimes I'll even, when I had more money, I would actually get 6 copies of a smaller kind of cheap game, and I'd hand those out. So everybody that played got something to take home with them. So needless to say, I always try to put in people's heads that when they play my games, that there's something more to them, that there's something interesting or just worthwhile about my games. And the reason I like to do this is you kind of get a little bit of a reputation, a word of mouth advertising. Because a lot of my games now, when I put them up on the schedule, they'll fill up pretty quickly. A lot of the people that go to the club regularly know me. They know what kind of games I run. They know how I run games. And the people that like that sort of thing usually flock to them. So that's good. Because there's nothing more frustrating than spending a lot of time working on something, and you put it on the schedule, and nobody shows up to play. That can be very frustrating. So how do you go about it? What are the first steps? What do you do? Some people like to play games that they're very familiar with, and that's a good way to go about it. I think that works well. But I've also kind of gotten into the habit of trying to run new games that I think are interesting that I haven't actually got to play yet. I like a lot of different types of games. So what I'll normally do is I'll go over the rules and I'll read them like 2 or 3 times. I'll take notes, give myself a cheat sheet, and then I'll come up with an adventure for that game and develop the NPCs. I'll make usually around 6 character sheets, sometimes more if I think the game is going to have a high mortality rate, and I will pre-generate that many characters. Because I've found that at a convention, if you sit down and make a character, that eats into the time that you're allotted for your game. In my experience, games usually run about 4 hours. I know some run 4 to 6. Some can actually be double slot games with like 8 hours long. But normally I think they're about 4 hours. So you really want to have pre-generated characters all lined up, all ready to go. And you can either let people choose them or hand them out randomly. In my experience, it's usually good to have a few extra characters, just in case one of them dies. And you really don't want someone sitting there for, an hour and have their character die. And like, okay, sorry, buddy. That's all I got for you. Enjoy the rest of the convention, So that's always a good idea. And when you make pre-generated characters, try to make them interesting. Try to think about different archetypes and what do people like to play, because it can kind of suck to play a pre-generated character that's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this here? Maybe even allow the players an opportunity to tweak the characters a little bit. Not a lot, because that'll eat into time, but just move some skill ranks or dots around if you're using like World of Darkness. But again, you want it to be interesting for them. You don't want it to be boring. You want it to be memorable. Another thing I like to do if I'm doing like a dungeon crawl, for instance, I will in the bottom of some boxes I had were some like thin cardboard and almost like poster board, and I collected these after a while. I had a pretty big box of them because I had in my head that I wanted to do something cool with them. So what I did was, for a dungeon crawl, I would cut out the shape of every room, and as they would go through the dungeon, it would self-map. I would just lay that room down. Maybe the first room is like 20 by 20, and there's 2 doors. Well, the doors are marked on the map, but when you look down the table, all you see is that room. And then what this does is it alleviates the need to have someone map. It is convenient. You just plop them down whichever way they go, and literally the map just forms on the table. I know a lot of people like the marker board maps, and I use them too. But for conventions, I like to have them just ready to go. It's a lot quicker. Nobody really has to wait for you to draw the room out because you spent, sometimes several hours putting little details on each one. And if you like this idea, you can actually put stuff on the map itself and see if the players ask about it. Well, okay, what are these red dots over here? Why is there like a dark swirly symbol there? Is that like a pile or something? What is that? So it'll actually have the players kind of interact with what you've done and kind of help them out while they're playing things out. But you want to try to make a game that can reasonably be finished in 4 to 6 hours, like I said, depending on what the slot is for your game. And Lefty wants to help out, apparently. Again, you want good word of mouth. You want people to have fun in your games. Ow. You want people to come back the next year. So you have to think about that. Another thing that people have done that I notice is that they'll have like a dry run. They'll have some friends over some night before the convention just to see what the game needs, what needs tweaked, what needs shortened, what needs long, what if there's sections that need more detail. And that's a good idea. I generally haven't done that. I think I've only done that once. Normally I do my prep work. I think of things that I think are going to be pretty cool. I show up and I run it and I see what happens. I do tend to like more rules light games, so I can kind of shoot from the hip more. But for conventions, I probably do about 2 times or 3 times the amount of work I normally do for an adventure, for a session. Again, just because I just want to make it special. But I don't know. Any of this information can be used for like one-shots as well. It's just for conventions, I usually try to go a little bit above the Call of Duty, try to do something cool. I don't know. Have you guys ever had an experience at conventions? Have you had a bad session? Have you had any like good experiences? I like handouts are really cool. I know some people really like getting handouts with like handwritten things, and I do like the tea leaves and the old paper and crumple it up, and I'll bring that to a convention game, see how that works out. But really, in my mind, when you're running a convention, you want to step it up. You want to have fun doing it. You want them to have fun. You want to see their faces light up when you hand them something or give them something, or there's some twist in the game that you thought was really cool. I might have another video about conventions, but for now that'll probably do. So I don't know. Just make your convention games very interesting.